All right, last time we learned about the false prophet and the true prophet. And now it's a commandment. You have to listen to a real prophet. And the punishment is death if you don't listen to a real prophet. Like I say, don't do this at home. There's no death penalty anymore in Judaism. And it was also almost impossible to apply it even when there was a death penalty. Okay, next, when the Jews go into Israel, they're going to have to fight battles. They're going to fight battles. Now, fighting battles is a pretty scary thing. In any case, you can get killed. Especially back then, it was really scary because you had to face the enemy face to face, except for bow and arrow. But they also had bow and arrow, but it was pretty much, there wasn't a hidden enemy so much. Anyway, the enemy was face to face. So that's a scary thing. You have to go and take a sword and face somebody else with a sword. And as usual, the Jews, just as they are today, were outnumbered. Here we go. When you go out to war on your enemy, you see a horse and a chariot. This is singular. You see one horse and one chariot. Not too scary. I mean, certainly you're going to outnumber that. So he says, no, Am Rav Mimcha, a greater number of enemies. Their enemies are bigger than you. Why does it say singular? We'll see. Lo tiram, it's a commandment. A commandment in the Torah not to be afraid. Now you can understand there's a commandment, not to run away. But how can you make a commandment not to be afraid? Not to be afraid is an emotion. Can you really control your emotions to that degree? Here you see, right, guy standing in front of you. 2 people are standing in front of you. 10 people are standing in front of you. They got swords. They're twice as big as you. They're trained, or they've just been waiting for this minute all of their lives. And they can come into war, come back home with some trophies or something, brag to their kids. And the Jewish people are not. It's a pretty amazing thing. At least in my lifetime, I've met a lot of. I personally was not in the army, in the Israeli army. Anyway, I mean, I came here. I was already older, and etc. Anyway, I had a bunch of excuses, but I wasn't in Israel. But I've met a lot of people that were in the Israeli army, and I've heard a lot of people who were combat soldiers, and I have a lot of good friends who were combat soldiers. I never, personally, I'm just telling you, me personally, I never heard of anybody brag about their experiences in the war. How many people I killed, how many this, and the enemy was all around me. Unless it's in like in an interview or something, and they want to say some big miracle that happened. Okay. What's my point? The point is the Jews are not looking forward to war. I mean, they're pretty good at it when they get into war. They're not bad at it at all. And Jews can be cruel. Also, there's cruel. There was some of the gangs in America. The Purple Gang, and these were Jews. They were like really cruel, but that was rare. It's rare. Jews, it says that if you see a Jew that's cruel, it's a big question on his Judaism. Jews are generally not cruel people. Like they're not cruel people. In fact, that's a quality of Jews. It says that with King David, when he saw there was one tribe that they were, he saw they were cried. There was a group. They said they were converts, and the Gibeonites, and they acted in a cruel way. So King David declared that they're not Jewish. You can't get married to them. Okay, so when you go out to war, so here you got these enemies that are just looking forward, to kill, and that's their whole life. And now you're going out to enemy to fight against them, and they're more than you are. So don't be afraid. How can you not be afraid? You'll see. Because God is with you. and he's taking you from the land of Israel. He took you from the land of Egypt. And when he took you from Egypt, you didn't have any weapons at all. Huh? And nevertheless, you defeated them. This is going out to war. It comes right after this thing that says, don't have any mercy on a person. That in a court, if someone puts out somebody's eye, so he has to pay the value of the eye. That's what it says. Don't have any mercy on him. Eye in the places of an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a hand for a hand, a foot for a foot. It doesn't mean like the non-Jews say. The Bible is cruel. It says an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. That's not what it says that. It does say it, but that's not what it means. And that's what it means. It means, right, like Rashi says, mammon. And also Shane Rashi, you have to pay the money. Right? A soul for a soul, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. You have to pay the value of the eye. A soul for a soul is different. If someone kills somebody, then, and there's witnesses and etc., then the person gets killed. But all the others, there's no such thing as taking out a person's eye as remuneration for the person taking out your eye. So it says, nevertheless, but that is what it says in the Torah. So it says over here to tell you that if a person that is missing a limb, like from the simple meaning of the Torah, if you're missing a limb, you can't go out to war. Another explanation, to tell you, but if you made proper judgments, and if your courts are just, ayin tachat ayin, this is in the true meaning of it, means you have to go to the court. Here, let's see what it says. Here. If two people, one person puts out another person's eye or ear or whatever, so you go to the judges, and the judges, they see what's the case. They see what the case is, and eye for eye. Okay, you'll have to look. It's a little bit deeper than that, but it means here it's talking about a person that gives false testimony. But nevertheless, you have to go to the judge, and the judge decides. So it's telling you that. Why is this right after this thing about going out to war? To tell you that if your courts are just, then you can be certain that if you do go out to war, you will win. King David, he said the same thing. Asiti mishpat tzedek, I have done justice and acted correctly, rightful justice. Bal tenicheni loshkai, don't put me in the hands of my enemies, King David said. So, and the merit of having just courts is you'll win your battles. Aloy vecha, it says if you go make war, al oivecha. No, it doesn't say. It says oivecha. That's what's written. The punctuation is with the oivecha, plural, but it just says oivcha as though it's only one person. Oivcha. They should be in your eyes. Oh no, I'm sorry. This is different. We'll get to this. I'm sorry. Al oivcha, on your enemies. Rashi says they should be in your eyes like enemies. Don't have any mercy on them, because they're not going to have any mercy on you, right? If they plead for their lives and say, we just want to be friends, don't have mercy on them. Do not take prisoners. They want to kill you, don't say, well, I'll let them go, and they learn their lesson. So that's not the way we fight battles. If they come to kill you, then you have to kill them, even after you defeat them. You have to treat them like enemies. If there's just one horse, sus for rechev, one horse, it says in your eyes it should be like one horse. And also it says v'ikisa midyan ki ish echad, like they're fighting against one man. And also it says sus paro, etc. Okay, there's a very interesting Ramban over here, but I think we're going to skip it for now. Something must have bit me over here. See this? Wow, look at this. I got a big spider by here. Okay, not important. This is really bothering me. It says, when you go out to war, the Ramban, he says, this is a commandment which is like constant. Anytime you go out to war, that you have to realize that you're not fighting. It's God is fighting for you. Do not rely on your strength. Do not rely on your swords and on your weapons. You have to have swords and weapons. And they should be new swords and weapons and modern swords and weapons. They should be the best swords and weapons, but don't depend on them. What? Put onto your heart only the fact, trusting in God. That's why it says a very interesting thing, that when Joshua went out and he fought against a city called Ai, so 36 men of his got killed. And he went wild. How could it be 36 people got killed? How could it be? Because he was doing a mitzvah. This war was a commandment. So it wasn't, if you're doing a commandment, it's not proper that even one person should fall. Not even one hair of a person's head should be hurt. So it says, because you're trusted. If you really trust in God, then you're going to be very unique, because the other nations, they're not trusting in God. They have their own, whatever they've got, their idols or whatever. You're going to be trusting in the creator of the universe. If you really trust in the creator of the universe, no one will die in the war. That's what he trusts. That's what he promises anyway. Okay, let's do a little bit the HaChaim over here. He says, when you go out to war, maybe this is giving a hint at a person going out to war against his own impulses. And that's what it's coming to tell you, to remove fear from your heart. How can you remove fear from your heart? Because it says, when you go against a war, this known war, the constant war which is fought by everyone against his own evil, you want to call it destructive self-impulses, right? She'en gedolim, this is the most difficult war of all. Remember, we learned in Pirkei Avos, who is a person who is powerful, a person that conquers himself. In this war, there's two things that are very, very difficult for a person. One is that, number one, it could be you don't know how to make war. You're not a warrior. One who's used to making the war is your Yetzer Hora, your evil impulse. Number two, generally speaking, a person by his nature, he likes the things that his evil impulse tells him. So if so, how is he going to win? Especially after a person trips up in one sin, so he wants to do more. So he's not even interested in fighting a battle. So we have two problems. Number one, I don't know how to fight. And number two, who says I should fight? Who says I've got an enemy? Maybe my evil impulse is my good friend, right? He's telling me, wow, this is really swollen up. Look at this. All right. So that's what it says. When you go out to war, you should treat it as though your enemy is just like one person, one horse and one person. This one horse, this is referring to the I'm sorry, right? One, your Yetzer Hora is just your evil impulse. I'm sorry, is just like one horse, which wants to make war against you, and you don't really want to make war against it, right? Number two, so in other words, don't be afraid. Maybe you're not as expert as he is, but you should understand he's not as big. Your Yetzer Hora, your evil impulse, is not as big and formidable as you think it is. Number two is Rechab. This is how a person is, that people like to do bad things. So he says, therefore it says, Am Rav Mimeka, a nation which is greater than you. Milchama. Av Rav Mimeka. The people are more than you, but it doesn't say than you. It says from you. From you. That's what Rashi says. In your eyes, they are many. But in my eyes, says God, they're not many. And that's what he's saying. The reason that you're afraid of them is because yourself, you were the one that made them big. It says, therefore, don't be afraid. The reason is because God is fighting on your side. He just wants you to start. That's the biggest problem. The problem is to get started. You're afraid to even begin. Exactly the opposite. You want to make friends. So I'll do a couple of sins. What's the big deal? Right? So he says, no, you start and you'll realize that the enemy is not as scary as you think it is. Because God is on your side. As soon as you start, God will help you. Okay, good. Here we see, for instance, like, you see, very interesting. We have the, the United Nations, how they all, they support the Arabs, and the Arabs are the good guys. They're such wonderful, friendly people, and so cultured, and so kind, and so, merciful. The non-Jews, but especially the Arabs. What are you talking about? The Arabs are, wonderful. That you say that they stone people and they destroy all their enemies. That's nothing compared to what the Jews do. Right? So we might think, listen, there's so many. Why should I make a war against them? So the answer is, like in the 6-Day War, that was a big thing. Also, when the Jews, that was a big thing with Menachem Begin. The Rebbe really pushed him to do this. When he destroyed the Iraqi atomic plant. They had this big atomic, whatever is this, for making, and he, against everybody, it was against the United Nations, against America, everyone, against the Israeli government also. He sent and they attacked and they destroyed it. And the whole world was against him. And it ended up, it was just like one person against him. There was nothing, he just didn't pay any attention, and absolutely nothing came out of it. Nothing. So that's what it means. You are going to go to enemy. You're going to go to war. You have enemies. Don't pretend you don't. Don't pretend like the Israeli government today says we'll be nice to them. They'll be nice to us. And not only that, we're outnumbered 1,000,000 to 1. And not only that, they're experts at war, and we're not such experts at war. It says, don't believe it. It's not so. The fact of the matter is that God is with you, and that no matter how big they are, they're like one person. You will win the battle. Okay, when you actually get near to the war, to the battle, Nigash Kohen, there's a Kohen, a specially appointed Kohen, is called Kohen Meshuach Milchama. He is anointed for war, and he speaks to the people. It says, right where you go, Rashi says, right where you go out, just as you're approaching the enemy, and you're at the border of the war. So the Kohen, this is Meshuach Lakan. He is especially appointed for this purpose, and he's called Meshuach Milchama. He's called anointed for war, and he speaks to the people in Hebrew. And he says, there are certain commandments that you have to say in Hebrew, and certain you don't have to say in Hebrew. This is when you do. But Omar Alayam, and he says, Shema Yisrael, listen, Jews, Atem Karivim Ayom L'Milchama, you're going out to war on your enemies. Al Yerach Lavavachem, don't be afraid. Al Tiro, don't have any fear. Al Techpazu, don't be, how do you say, nervous. Al Tartzu Mipenehem, and do not also like flee. He says there's different types of fear. You'll see what it is in Rashi. See, I don't want to take up that much time, but he says that the enemy, maybe I'll just shorten it for you. He says that the enemy, what they do, they try first of all psychological warfare. The enemy is, even back then, psychological war. What do? They're, first of all, they outnumber you. And so they make all this noise. They blow trumpets, and they pound on their shields, and they yell out and they scream, and they make their horses, neigh. So you hear all these horses, and these, you only have like 10,000 men, and they have 100,000 men. They have all these horses, and so you might get scared. So it says, don't be afraid from this when they hit. It says, your hearts should not be weak when you hear their horses. You shouldn't be afraid when they start beating on their shields. Don't get nervous when they start sounding the trumpets. And don't, or it says when they start screaming out, they all yell out, don't be afraid. The Kli Ykar, though, says, Rashi says, let's get it. Where says we skip this. They say, Shema Yisrael, listen, Jews, you're going to war. Rashi says, Shema Yisrael, even if you only have the merit of saying Shema Yisrael alone. Right? Let's say you have the army of Jews, like now, today. You've got a lot of soldiers, and they don't keep Shabbos, they don't eat kosher. Like they're not interested, they come from kibbutzes or whatever, they don't keep Yom Kippur or anything like this. But they say Shema Yisrael. That's all they've got. Say Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. If that's the only merit they had, Kedai Atem Sheyirshu Otam. You're going to win the enemies. You're going to win the battle. You're already on top. Just Shema Yisrael. Says the Kli Ykar. Rashi says if they just say Shema Yisrael, I sort of don't agree with that. So he says, Rashi says even if they only say Shema Yisrael. So he says even if they saying Shema Yisrael is such a small thing. That's very important. But he says, it seems to me that Rashi is right, but it's not saying Shema Yisrael is the main thing, that the main thing is that they put on tefillin, especially the tefillin on the head. And inside of the tefillin is written Shema Yisrael. And also when you put on tefillin, you're supposed to say Shema Yisrael. And it says even more that if you say Shema and you don't put on tefillin, it's like you're giving false witness. Because in Shema, in the first paragraph of Shema, it says you should put tefillin on a sign between your eyes and etc. It says, and when you put tefillin on your head, it says that the enemy is afraid. Like it says, Ro Kamal Oretz, that your enemy will see that the name of God is called on you, and they'll be afraid of you. And the rabbis say this is the name, this is the tefillin on the head. So that's what he says. Putting on the tefillin, that's what makes them afraid. Because God, Elokeichem, God, your God, hold it. By the way, interestingly enough, this thing that Chabad puts on tefillin on everybody, they go around and they have this massive stand in the streets with them. When did this start? It started like, I think a week or a couple of weeks, whatever, before the 6-Day War. The 6-Day War. No one knew what was going to go on. All the nations, all the Arabs around us, they were all preparing for war. Everybody knew it. The United Nations didn't help us. They withdrew all their troops, all their help. All the Jews, the Rebbe said, don't worry about it. Nothing's bad's going to happen. But he sent down people to the wall, to other places, to put tefillin on Jews. He made a big thing that he said the Hasidic Chabad should go around and ask Jews in the street to put on tefillin. That's when the whole thing started. So that was already, how long ago was it? That was 50-something years ago, right? 53 or 55 years ago. That's what that, so putting on the tefillin, that's what scares the enemy. And so that's what happened. But Dibro Shotrim and these, that's what the Kohen says, the high priest. Then there are policemen. They speak to the police and they say, the people, and they say, who is a person that has just built a new house and he did not yet, how do you say, enter it, whatever. He said he never lived in it. He didn't make a Chanukah Tabayit. He didn't go live in it. And he said he should go back to his house. Why? Because maybe he'll die in war and someone else will come and take the house over. So what's he talking about? The soldier's going to go out to war and he's going to say, man, maybe I'm going to get killed, and I worked so hard on this house. And he's going to have his mind on his house. And he won't have the mind on the enemy. But mostly he's not going to have his mind on God. He's going to be worried that he's going to lose out. Who is a person who planted a vineyard and he did not yet, use it? He should go back to his house. Maybe he's going to die in war and someone else will use it. What does it mean? Rashi says he didn't even have it for 4 years. He didn't redeem it on the 4th year. The first 3 years that he you plant a fruit tree, you can't eat from the fruits. It's called orla. And the fourth year, it says you can redeem the fruits and take the fruits. You can either take the fruits up to Jerusalem, whatever, and eat them. So he says, if you planted a vineyard, a person planted a vineyard, and it hasn't come yet to the fourth year, as he's going to be worried. Why? Maybe I'm going to die. Somebody else. Who is a person who has engaged to a woman, but he didn't yet take her, didn't marry her, go back to his house. Maybe he's going to die in the war, and someone else will, etc., will take her and marry her. And these policemen, they will speak to the people and they say, who is someone who is afraid and has a soft heart? He should go back to his house and don't scare others. What does this mean? Look and see. The Rebbe once said a lot of times, lo lefached, lo lafchid. Don't be afraid and don't make others afraid. Why does it say over here, an additional thing, that the Kohen is speaking to the people, and he says that, and he says, who is a person, the Kohen is saying, and there's a policeman that he repeats it, what is an officer? Right? All this is said by the Kohen, but he's just repeating it over. It's being repeated over by the special, how do you say, policeman that stands there and announces it. But he says, here's the last one. What about a person that he's not just married a lady and he has one excuse. He's afraid. He's afraid. That's it. You're afraid, you can go home. That's all. But you don't have to say, listen, I have a bad back and bring all doctor's reports. You're afraid, don't go to war. Rabbi Akiva says that's a simple meaning. He's afraid. He can't stand in war. He can't stand to see a sword is drawn opposite him. He passes out, faints. It's scary. Rabbi Yossi Galili said it means that he's afraid because of the sins. He did sins in the past, and he's afraid that God will not protect him. Therefore, the whole Torah says he should go back. That's why the Torah says that if you have built a new house, you have a vineyard, you have a woman, a new wife, you didn't get married to her yet, you got engaged. This is to give him an excuse. So we won't say, yeah, I did a few sins, It gives him an excuse to say, no, it's not because of sins. I'm not. It's just that, wow, I just built a new house. I didn't move into it. Shelo Yavinu, that no one will understand that the reason he's going back home is because of the sins that he did. Yeah, when the police stop speaking, when these officers, whatever, stop speaking, and then the generals or whatever, the generals and the officers, they start to organize these soldiers. It says, what is it? That they put in before them, soldiers go in front of the army and behind them. And they have like big poles of iron. And anyone that wants to run away now, but you want to go back home, go back home. But when war starts, you can't run away. If you do, then they have special people that stand there and they have permission to hit them on their thighs. Why? Because Techilas Nefila, because the beginning of defeat, Nisa is, how do you say, running away. The beginning of defeat is retreat. As soon as you run away from the enemy, then every other people are going to see, and it takes away the morale. Okay, let's just do this shortly. When you come near to a city to make war against it, first of all, call to the city for peace. This is talking about an optional war. Like it talks about. When the Jews came into the land of Israel, they had an obligational war. They had to fight against the 7 nations that were there. And here's what's called an optional war. An optional war is that you can sometimes make a war just in order to increase the area of Israel, to increase the coffers. Anyway, you say peace. If they answer you for peace, then everyone in the city becomes like your servants. if they don't make peace with you, and they decide, first of all, then you can make, and they say, we're going to make war. So lay siege to the city. And then God will put it into your hands. And then you can kill all the males by sword. Right? If you do exactly what I say, then God will put it into your hands. Only the women and the children and the animals and everything that's in the city, you can take for spoil, and you can eat the spoil of your enemies that God put into your hands. Why? So it will be to all the cities which are far from, these are all the other cities in Israel. We're talking about conquering the cities in Israel. Only the cities of these nations that Hashem gave to you, then you shouldn't let anybody live. These 7 nations that God said that you have to conquer them, there you shouldn't let anybody live. HaChaim tachreim, you should destroy them totally. And who are these nations? The Hittite, the Amori, the Canaani, the Perizi, the Chivi, Hayavusi. Hey, that's only 6. What happened to us? This also the Girgoshi. It says Tzivach, that's the Girgoshi. That's the 7 nations that God promised Abraham 10 nations, but he only gave to Abraham, to Moses 7, and Mashiach is going to take the other 3. And in this week's Torah portion, we skipped it over, is the commandment to make cities of refuge. We spoke about it before, but here it's more in detail. And it says over there that you have to make 6 cities of refuge, 3 of them east of the Jordan and 3 of them west of the Jordan. And it says, and when Mashiach comes, God's going to make 3 more cities of refuge, give you 3 more cities of refuge. And there's a lot of discussion why, when Mashiach comes, well, we need cities of refuge. I mean, afterwards, what are these cities of refuge? The cities are for people who killed someone else accidentally. More exactly, someone who killed someone else by negligence. Not purposely, but by negligence. As he has to run to these cities. When Mashiach comes, there's going to be killing people by negligence. So there's a lot of different answers that are given. Some say that this is talking about people who killed others by negligence before Mashiach arrived. Others say that no, it's the whole idea of what killing will be on a much higher spiritual level. And so running to these cities of refuge will be even for people that killed someone else, say spiritually, or they even went against God, who God is also called a man. So they spilled the blood, so to speak, of their connection to the Creator. Anyway, there are answers that are given, and it tells exactly where these cities of refuge will be. So it says, nevertheless, when you come into these places, don't learn to do the abominations that they do to their asher asul, that they do to their gods. They sacrifice their children to their gods, etc. And don't do sins to your God, What do we learn from this? That if the non-Jews in Israel, they do tshuva, they repent, and they convert, right? They convert, then you can accept them. Don't think you have to kill them. And here's an interesting commandment, and this will be the end for today's class. If you lay siege to a city, to war against it, and you want to make like battering rams and whatever, don't destroy the cities, and then don't destroy the trees, the fruit trees that are around the cities, in order to make into whatever spears and, like I said, battering rams, assault, say assault mounds or whatever they call them. Back then, they would make if there was a city with a big wall, so they would cut down trees and they would put on wheels, they would build it up high, and then they would push it right next to the wall, and the soldiers could jump over from this edifice that they built from wood into the besieged city. Says, okay, good, but don't cut down fruit trees. Why? Because you're there to kill people, not trees. Adam Eitz Asareh is a tree of the field, a man. that you should come on it. You're there to kill trees? No. Only only a tree that you know is not a fruit tree, that you can destroy and cut it down. And you can build weapons of war on the city that you are putting under siege. So see, this law also applies in Israel now today. The law applies in Israel now today. You're not supposed to cut down trees that actually produce fruits. Someplace it's a big problem. If the tree stops producing fruits, then you can allow it to cut it down. Anyway, there's a lot of details of the laws. Let's just do this last one over here, even though it's a bit late, but we'll do it quickly. If you find a dead body on the ground in Israel, and you don't know who smote him, who smote this person, right? You don't know. So what do? The elders of the city and the judges, they go and they measure to the cities which are right next. So there's no witnesses, nobody knows. So they go out and they measure to the closest city. The city which is the closest, usually they measure from a person's nose, the dead person. The city which is the closest, so the elders of the city, they take a calf that never worked, never did any work, and it never pulled a yoke. And they take the elders from the city. Now it has to be that everybody, right? They go to the city and they say, listen, we found this dead body. Does anybody know who this is? And everybody says, no, we don't know. Nobody knows who it is. I have no idea. Did he come into the city? Has he passed through our city? He says, nobody knows. We never saw him before. But no one knows. So what do? So it says you measure. Here you have a dead person and nobody knows, nobody cares, nobody has any idea who he is. So it says we have to blame someone. We cannot say that a Jew died and that no one is at fault. Someone has to be at fault, even in the furthest way. Somebody didn't see him, they should have offered him food. But nobody did see him. Nobody knows who it is. So it says the elders of the city, which is closest to this dead body, and like I said, there's special ways of how you measure. You measure from his nose. The elders of the city, they take this calf to a river, a powerful river, not old river, that never was worked. It was never planted there on this river. And they break the neck of this calf. And the Kohanim, of course, come from the tribe of Levi. And they're the ones that God chose to serve and to bless in the name of God. And according to them, they make all the decisions. They were like the judges. And also all the elders of the city, they happen to be closest to the dead person. And they wash their hands over this dead egla aruf, of this calf whose neck is broken. And they all say, our hands did not pour the blood of this person, and our eyes did not see him. What does it mean? Rashi says, what you might think that the elders, you suspect them that maybe they killed this person, but it means that we didn't see him, and we didn't ask him if he wants food, or if he maybe wants somebody to accompany him. The Kohanim say, forgive the Jewish people. God, forgive the Jewish people that you took out of Egypt, and this innocent blood, right, should not be blamed on your people, and please forgive us for this death. And now, God, clean out this innocent blood from you, because kitasa yashar beinei Hashem, and do what is straight. Moses is speaking to the people in the eyes of God. What does it mean? Do what is straight in the eyes of God. That if you find who the murderer was, after you break the neck of the calf, then you should take the murderer, if you prove that he's a murderer, and kill him. And that's what it means in what's straight in the eyes of God. And that is the end of this week's Torah portion. God willing, tomorrow, we're going to learn Pirkei Avot a little bit, huh? We have to learn a little bit. We've skipped it. Tomorrow we will learn the Haftorah, beautiful Haftorah of Isaiah, comforting the Jewish people. But let's learn Pirkei Avot first. Here we go.